So we talked about the different relationships between species, how species can interact with each other. Now I want to talk about trophic structures. Trophic structures are going to be almost like food chains and food webs, how different organisms are related to each other and how energy moves through a system. With ecology, in the end, it's followed the bouncing electron. Electrons are going to move through a system, and every time they move through, they're moving energy through it. So we're going to figure out primary producers, primary consumers, secondary and tertiary consumers, and understand how to draw food webs. There's a distinct structure to communities, and it revolves around who eats who. Every organism out there, like we said, that is not photoautotrophic exploits another. But that doesn't say all exploiting organisms are on the same level. Ants are predators. So are we. Who's higher up on the trophic scale? Yeah, who eats who? You could eat an ant, though. So at the top of the food chain, you're going to have your top tier predators, and then as you go down, you're going to end up with your bottom level producers. Now you've probably heard me talk about food chains, but there are also there's this change in thought that they may be considered food webs, because the truth is there's not a linear relationship between predator species and prey species. It's a food web because there's lots of different interconnections, like a spider's web, versus a straight line from the lowest level to the top level. Further, it's not like a food pyramid. Now, some species in the community are going to have a different type of relationship. There are some species that are known as dominant species. Other species are keystone species. Both dominant species and keystone species have a gigantic impact on all of the species around them. A dominant species is the most abundant species, and it has the highest biomass. In this image, what is the dominant species? So the monitor has to be the lizard, right? No, it's not the lizard. Keep going. It's the grass. Why is it the grass? Because the grass is the most abundant, and it has the greatest biomass. The weight of that grass is going to outscale the weight of that monitor lizard. We always forget about the plants. Plants are, in fact, integrated into the system. They can be a dominant species. Another very important species is going to be the keystone species. Keystone species are going to maybe not be the biggest species out there, even the most abundant, but they have an enormous impact. Salmon are a gigantic keystone species up in Alaska. Why? Because they're going to end up, their runs as they go to spawn are going to not just provide energy to bears. Oh, bears love these times of year because the streams are filled with salmon. They just start pulling them up and eating them. But not only they don't eat all of it, they eat part of the salmon, then grab another salmon, and they start eating that one. What happens to the carcasses of those salmon? Where do the carcasses go? Somewhere. Who cares? On the ground, right? And it stinks. What happens to the carcasses? They break down. And what does that do for the soil? It gives nutrients to the soil, leading to a lot of plant growth. So this species of salmon is going to impact not just their immediate predators, but is going to help grow all of the ecosystem. Another major keystone species that I tend to look at a lot is the, let's talk about the killer whale, the orca. Killer whales, what do you guys know? They're actually dolphins. They're not whales. Killer whales are called killer whales because they kill whales, right? The deal is, though, they will hunt whales as a pack. Then they'll eat that whale. But as the whale population decreased, the orca population had to find another prey species. They started eating seals. Well, seals have much smaller biomass than whales, which means they've got to eat a lot more seals for what they would normally eat as a whale. All right, so as the seal population goes down, now the orca turns to other organisms. The sea otter. You can see the sea otter's not that big. They're, it's not like they're a seal or they're a whale. So as they prey on these sea otter populations, the sea otter population goes down. Sea otters eat sea anemones. Well, as the sea otter population goes down, what happens to the sea anemone population? It goes up. Sea anemones eat kelp. Not just kelp, they eat the bottom of the kelp. So they eat the base of the kelp, that releases the kelp forests, and kelp forests are a major fishery. That's where baby fish go to live. So now, as the population of orcas shifts their behaviors, they're eating more sea otters, you're losing kelp forest, which means you're losing all of the other fish species, because now their babies have nowhere to hide. They are a keystone species. They impact not just themselves, not just one other species or two other species, but every species in the region.